denied access to a private jet because of how they looked. But what the crew didn't know would change everything. Judged, dismissed, humiliated, until the shocking truth left everyone speechless. Stay with us because what happens next is a powerful lesson you'll never forget. Watch until the end to see how this jaw-dropping story unfolds. And while you're here, hit that subscribe button and tell us where you're watching from. The private terminal at Manhattan Executive Airfield buzzed with quiet efficiency. Luxury cars pulled up to the entrance, dropping off wealthy passengers headed to exclusive destinations. Among the crowd, Elijah Brooks, founder and CEO of Brooks Tech Solutions, exited a sleek black SUV. Elijah was headed to London for a major tech conference, where he'd deliver a keynote speech. His company had revolutionized artificial intelligence, making him one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the tech world. But today, he wanted no fanfare, just a quick, smooth flight on his private jet, Skybound One. He pulled his travel bag behind him and approached Hangar 14, where his Gulfstream G700 awaited. As he walked toward the entrance, he noticed Richard Lane, the airport's chief of operations, standing with the flight crew, Mark Steele, the smug pilot, Lisa Hart, the indifferent co-pilot, and Claire Monroe, the dismissive flight attendant. Elijah offered a polite nod as he approached. Richard's expression immediately darkened, his eyes narrowing. "Excuse me, sir," Richard called out sharply. "This area is restricted. No unauthorized personnel allowed." "I'm here for Skybound One," Elijah explained calmly. "I need to board now." Richard crossed his arms. "Skybound One is reserved for a very important client. You can't loiter here. Security will be called if needed." Elijah frowned, trying to keep his composure. "I'm the client. Skybound One belongs to me." Richard laughed dismissively, exchanging a knowing smirk with Mark and Lisa. "Sure it does," Mark sneered. "And I'm the president." "Listen, buddy," Richard continued coldly. "We've got a strict policy against random people wandering into the hangar. You can't just claim you own a jet." Claire rolled her eyes, muttering, "Typical." Elijah took a slow breath. He'd faced discrimination before, but this was different. He pointed to the jet. "Why don't you check the ownership records? My name's on the registration." Richard waved him off. "I don't have time for games." Mark snickered. "Maybe you're here to take a selfie with the jet or something." The flight crew erupted in quiet laughter. Elijah took a slow, steady breath, fighting the familiar frustration rising within him. This wasn't the first time he'd been judged by his appearance, but today the stakes felt personal. He considered turning around and calling his assistant to clear up the confusion, but something inside him refused to back down. He stepped closer, keeping his tone firm but calm. "I'm asking you one last time. Check the jet's registration records. You'll see my name." Richard crossed his arms defiantly, unfazed. "Look, I don't care what story you're spinning. People like you don't fly jets like that. Now either leave, or I'll have security escort you out." Elijah's jaw tightened, but he held his ground. "People like me? You heard me," Richard replied coldly. "Only authorized owners and guests are allowed here. You don't belong." Mark, the pilot, leaned against the hangar door, smirking. "Let's not waste time. Probably some delivery guy who got lost." Claire, the flight attendant, chuckled. "Or a wannabe influencer looking for a photo op." Elijah glanced at the jet gleaming under the hangar lights. His jet, while the sting of humiliation burned inside him. He wasn't about to let their ignorance define the outcome. "I'm done talking," Elijah said, pulling out his phone. "We're about to settle this." Elijah paced slowly near the edge of the hangar, phone in hand, fighting to keep his emotions in check. The sting of disrespect was familiar, but today it hit deeper. He thought about how often people like Richard, Mark, and Claire assumed power they didn't have, judging others based on appearances while hiding behind corporate policies. He stared at Skybound One, the sleek Gulfstream jet he had worked his entire life to own. It wasn't just a symbol of success. It was a milestone representing years of sacrifice, long nights, and relentless determination. Yet here he was, reduced to a nobody by people who couldn't see past his skin color or casual clothes. For a brief moment, he considered walking away, avoiding confrontation altogether. He could have called airport management directly or sent his assistant, Rachel Thompson, to fix the mess quietly. But that would mean accepting their treatment without consequences. And Elijah was done accepting disrespect. Clenching his jaw, he scrolled through his contacts and tapped Rachel's number. "Rachel, I need you to send Skybound One's full ownership documentation to the operations office at Manhattan Executive Airfield. Copy the legal team, too." Elijah ordered sharply. Rachel didn't hesitate. "Consider it done. Everything will be there in minutes." Elijah hung up and slipped his phone into his pocket. This wasn't just about clearing up a misunderstanding. It was about making a point they would never forget. "Let's see how they handle the truth," he muttered, stepping back toward the hangar with calm determination. Before Richard could continue, Elijah held up a hand. "Save it." Turning to the stunned flight crew, he said coldly, "All of you, off my jet. Now." Mark blurted, "Wait, we didn't know. I told you who I was." Elijah interrupted. "You chose to ignore me, mock me, and treat me like garbage. There's no place for that in my company." Claire stammered. "It was just a misunderstanding." "No, it wasn't." Elijah shot back. "It was discrimination. Plain and simple." He turned to Richard. "Effective immediately. You're fired. Collect your things and leave the premises." Security guards, now fully aware of the situation, escorted the disgraced crew out of the hangar. Days later, Skybound Aviation's corporate headquarters in New York was tense. Every senior executive, team supervisor, and key staff member had been summoned for an emergency meeting. Rumors about the sudden firings of Richard Lane, Mark Steele, Lisa Hart, and Claire Monroe circulated, leaving employees uneasy. Elijah Brooks entered the room with quiet authority, his expression firm and focused. He approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the crowd, ensuring every gaze was fixed on him. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice steady but sharp. "I called this meeting to address something far more critical than company profits or expansion." The room fell silent. "Last week at Manhattan Executive Airfield, I faced something unacceptable: discrimination and outright disrespect. Not as your CEO, but as a human being." Murmurs rippled through the audience as Elijah recounted the humiliating experience in precise detail: the mockery, the refusal to check his credentials, and the dismissive treatment he endured. His tone remained controlled but resolute. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a protocol error. It was blatant discrimination, an abuse of authority fueled by prejudice. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "The individuals involved have been terminated for gross misconduct. But this isn't just about consequences. It's about responsibility." His gaze swept the room. "Starting immediately, Skybound Aviation will implement mandatory training on diversity, respect, and ethical conduct for every employee." The room remained silent, charged with the understanding that real change was coming, and it wouldn't be optional. In the weeks that followed, Elijah implemented sweeping changes at Skybound Aviation. New diversity and inclusion training programs became mandatory for all employees. The company also partnered with minority-owned aviation firms to create new opportunities in the industry. During a major aviation summit, Elijah shared his story publicly for the first time. "Leadership isn't about titles or wealth," he said. "It's about action. You change a culture by standing up, especially when no one expects you to." His words resonated far beyond the industry, proving that real power isn't measured by what you own, but by how you use it. Subscribe now for more powerful stories that inspire action and challenge perspectives. Have you ever experienced or witnessed something similar? Share your story in the comments.